State and government laws require construction workers to wear hard hats and police officers to wear bulletproof vests. If we're taking these safety precautions for people that do services for our communities, why aren't we doing the same for prostitutes? I'm here to talk to you today about legalizing prostitution across the United States. Now, 22 countries throughout the world have some form of legalized prostitution, including the United States. We have legalized prostitution in just the county limits of Las Vegas County, excluding Las Vegas City. That's a very small portion of the United States. Now, there are 40 million prostitutes worldwide, and 10% of the male population has admitted to buying a prostitute at some point. If so many people have risked everything to somehow engage in the prostitution industry, isn't there some kind of problem? I believe that we should legalize and regulate prostitution as a matter of safety. Not only would it be safer for the people that purchase the prostitutes, it would be safer for the prostitutes themselves. So first off, it would be safer for the Johns. Now, I want to define a John as someone who has purchased a prostitute at some point in their life. Now, some part of the regulation would include STD testing. Not only would the prostitutes be tested, but so would the Johns. Now, according to sexcrimes.org, 6 to 8% of STDs in the US are related to prostitution. Now, that doesn't seem like such a big number, but keep in mind, 50% of prostitutes have HIV, also according to sexcrimes.org. That's not an estimate. 50% of America's prostitutes have HIV. Spreading that disease is inevitable, and with some kind of STD testing, we could greatly prevent the number of people contracting this disease. This would include testing for all prostitutes to make sure that they aren't spreading any kind of STDs or STIs to the Johns. Furthermore, there'd be no fear of jail. According to sexcrimes.org, 80,000 men are arrested every year for soliciting sex. 80,000. That's a ridiculously high number. If these men are willing to risk going to jail for prostitution, don't you think there's some kind of human want in this industry? They're also risking monetary loss. 20% of Johns report being robbed by a prostitute. That's 20% of people who have some way or another lost money from a prostitute. With these new screening processes, prostitutes wouldn't be allowed to steal money from the Johns without some kind of harsh regulation that isn't in place today. And not only would this be safer for the Johns, it'd also be a lot safer for the prostitutes. The same kind of STD screening process would apply for the prostitutes. Furthermore, sexcrimes.org reports that a prostitute is beaten roughly 12 times a year. That doesn't mean 12 different prostitutes are beaten once a year. That means roughly every prostitute is beaten 12 times a year. That's an insane statistic. If every prostitute is beaten 12 times a year, there's not one prostitute that hasn't been beaten at least once. Furthermore, 204 out of every 100,000 prostitutes are murdered. That's over 20 times the national average, according to sexcrimes.org. 204 people out of 100,000 murdered. Furthermore, 58% of female prostitutes reported some kind of assault. Those are only the reported cases, not to mention the ones that went unreported due to fear. If 58% of female prostitutes report some kind of assault, there is a problem. And that problem could very well be taken care of by some sort of legalization and regulation. Furthermore, there would be no pimps imposing on these prostitutes. According to rapeis.org, 90% of women in prostitution have a pimp. Now, when I say the word pimp, what comes to your mind? A lot of people might think of a smooth-talking man in a fur coat and a big hat. That's not what most pimps look like. Most pimps look like your average rough guy forcing women to give them some of their cut and forcing them into situations they don't want to partake in. According to thegospelcoalition.org, most pimps use tactics like coercion and fraud to keep prostitutes in the business, and some use manipulation and force to put them in situations that they aren't comfortable in. Now, a lot of women are pressured into prostitution and feel like they have no choice, but according to sexcrimes.org, around 8% of prostitutes have made the choice voluntarily and are happy with their lives. Now, that's not a huge number, but that is a significant part of prostitutes that wouldn't want to change their jobs. So we should be paying them a living wage. Pimps have instituted monetary quotas on their prostitutes, stating they must make a certain amount of money per day of the week, or even taking percentages of their profits away from them to support the pimps instead of the prostitutes. and it's only resulting in financial pain for these prostitutes. Now, I know this is a controversial topic, so I'd like to take a moment to address some of the opposing views. The morality is one of them. A lot of people will say prostitution isn't legal. I'd like to take a moment to remind you that's not the argument. The argument is that prostitution should be regulated and legalized for safety, not for morality. Just legalizing something doesn't make it any more moral. And I realize this isn't what some people consider a moral job, but if we're going by that standard, there are plenty of immoral jobs in the United States. Some politicians aren't even moral. If they have no problem being immoral themselves, why should they have a problem legalizing an immoral business? Furthermore, it would open up prostitution to a bigger audience. You might think that would increase the amount of dangerous interactions for prostitutes. But just because we're opening up to a bigger audience by legalizing it doesn't mean we're not being more selective. Like I said, these screening processes would be so selective that it would be very hard to engage in some type of prostitution without being almost positively sure there's no danger to you or the prostitute. I want to thank you guys again for taking the time to listen to me talking about why we should legalize prostitution across the United States. I hope you learned something about one of America's most booming industries, a $58 billion industry. Thank you.